My family had been calling me a failure for 15 years when my mother finally needed the one thing none of them had ever bothered to understand about me. At 6:12 on a Thursday morning, I walked into the preoperative holding bay just beyond the restricted operating suite doors at Meridian Heart Institute in Houston, wearing Navy scrubs, a disposable cap, and the identification badge my mother had never seen. Adai's Okafor was already on the stretcher, warmed under 2 blankets, an IV taped to her left hand. My father stood near the wall. My sister Neka was holding our mother's purse and speaking quietly to the nurse. Mom saw me first. For 1 second, her face softened. Then confusion replaced it. "Claire? What are you doing here?" I stopped at the foot of the bed. "I'm here to talk to you about your operation." She looked past me as if the actual surgeon might be coming through the curtain. I had expected anger, maybe disbelief. I was not prepared for the small, embarrassed laugh she gave instead. "Honey, I know you work here." The nurse beside her went still. I said, "Mom, I'm Dr. Claire Okafor. I'm the cardiothoracic surgeon joining Dr. Chen on your case." My father lowered himself into the plastic chair behind him. Neka's hand tightened around the strap of Mom's purse. My mother stared at the badge clipped to my chest, then at my face. For 15 years, my family had called me difficult, stubborn, selfish, and finally a failure because I had chosen medicine over the restaurant they believed I owed them. For 3 years, my mother and I had not spoken at all. Now, a cardiologist had sent her to Houston for a complicated heart operation, asking specifically for the aortic team I worked on, and she had reached the morning of surgery without understanding that the daughter she thought had abandoned the family was one of the surgeons being asked to save her life. I did not walk into that room to teach her a lesson. I walked in because before anyone put her to sleep, she had the right to know exactly who would be operating on her and the right to say no. "My name is Claire Okafor. I'm 38 years old and I am a cardiothoracic surgeon in Houston, Texas. I spend most of my working life around hearts that have reached the point where medication, patience, and good intentions are no longer enough. When an aorta is dangerously enlarged or a valve has stopped doing its job, sentiment does not change anatomy. You look at the scans, you make a plan. You tell the truth about the risk, then if the patient agrees, you do the work. My family had always preferred a different kind of medicine. They believed almost anything could be fixed by staying close, working harder, and not embarrassing the people who loved you. That belief had built our restaurant. It had also nearly destroyed us. My parents, Emeka and Adai's Okafor, came to Texas from Nigeria in their 20s. My father arrived first with an accounting certificate that no employer in Houston seemed interested in honoring. My mother came 8 months later and worked nights as a nursing assistant while he stocked shelves at a warehouse. They saved for 9 years before opening a 12-table restaurant in a strip center off Bissonnette. They called it Ada's Table because my father said Americans would pronounce Ada more easily than Adai's. My mother rolled her eyes and let him put it on the sign. By the time I was 10, the restaurant had 28 tables, a loyal Sunday crowd, and a kitchen that smelled like fried plantains, pepper soup, onions, and the industrial lemon cleaner my father bought by the case. By 13, Eneka and I both worked there after school. She was 3 years older and naturally good with people. She remembered regulars' names, knew whose children had gone to college, and could calm Dad down when a supplier delivered the wrong goat meat. I was better in the back. I liked systems. I liked knowing why the freezer temperature mattered, why one table turned 3 times on a Friday while another sat empty, why a missing prep list could ruin a dinner rush 2 hours later. When I was 16, I made a color-coded chart for the walk-in refrigerator. My father laughed until the health inspector complimented it. After that, he laminated the chart and told customers his clever daughter had designed it. At home, however, cleverness was useful only when it came back to the family. My parents did not say that in a cruel way. They did not have to. We grew up inside the lesson. The restaurant paid our mortgage. The restaurant sponsored cousins when they first arrived in Texas. The restaurant covered Neka's community college tuition and bought me the used Honda I drove through high school. If an aunt needed a job, there was a shift. If somebody's church fundraiser ran short, Mom sent trays. If my father said the dinner rush had been terrible, Nobody in our house asked whether we were still going to the movies. Family adjusted. That was how love worked in the Okafor house. I loved them. I also wanted to become a doctor before I had any idea how long that road would be. The first time I saw an open chest was not in person. I was 17, sitting in the school library during a career program, watching a grainy educational video about coronary bypass surgery. Half the class looked away when the surgeon began working. I leaned forward. It was not the blood that held me. It was the precision. A human heart could be failing in a way that seemed enormous and terrifying, and a team could reduce the problem to anatomy, sequence, and skill. Place the clamp correctly, protect the heart, restore flow, watch the monitor, then check again. There was something almost merciful about a problem that did not care who was the good daughter. I did well enough in school to earn scholarships and get into the University of Houston. I lived at home, studied biology, and worked 3 dinner shifts a week at Ada's table. Neka was already there full-time by then. She had started a business degree but paused after our father developed a herniated disc and could not stay on his feet for 12 hours anymore. Just 1 semester, she said. 1 semester became 2 years. Nobody called that failure. They called it sacrifice. When I was 22, I got into medical school. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter for almost an hour before I opened it because I wanted all 4 of us there. Neka had flour on her sleeve from helping the cook with meat pies. Mom was still in her restaurant blouse. Dad read the first line over my shoulder and shouted so loudly our neighbor came to the back door. For 10 minutes, I was exactly the daughter they wanted. Then my father asked when classes started. August, his face changed. That spring, he had signed a lease on a second location in Pearland. The original restaurant was finally profitable enough, he believed, to expand. The new place was twice the size and the contractor was already behind schedule. Neka was managing the old restaurant. Mom was splitting her time between the kitchen and bookkeeping. Dad had been counting on me to handle systems, vendors, and staffing for the new site. I had known he talked about it. I had not understood that in his mind I had already agreed. August? He repeated, yes. He looked at Mom, then back at me. You can defer 1 year. I thought I had misheard him. Why would I do that for the opening? Once Pearland is stable, you go. I can't just assume they'll hold my seat. Then ask. Mom touched my wrist. 1 year is not your whole life. At 22, I still believed the right explanation could fix almost anything. I told them medical training did not work like a restaurant schedule. I told them I had spent 4 years building toward this. I told them the second location had been Dad's decision, not mine. That last sentence was the one they heard. My father pushed his chair back. So this family is not your responsibility. I shook my head. I didn't say that. You called it my decision. Because it was your decision, Dad. Neka was standing by the sink. She never looked at me. Mom said, Claire, your sister has already given up so much. That was true, which made it harder. I said I didn't ask her to. The room went quiet. It was one of those sentences that is factually correct and emotionally disastrous. Neka turned then. Of course you didn't. I wanted to take it back. Instead I defended it. That was one of my flaws at 22. Once I felt cornered, I mistook accuracy for wisdom. I started medical school that August. The Pearland restaurant opened 6 weeks late. It struggled almost immediately. Dad had underestimated labor costs, the rent was higher than projected, and the location did not have the dinner traffic he had expected. Neka worked 6 days a week between both sites. My mother developed migraines, my father stopped sleeping. Every family problem collected around the same explanation. Claire left. At first, the language stayed mild. Your sister is the practical one. Neka understands family. Claire has always been stubborn. Then one Sunday, when I was 23 and home after an anatomy exam, I heard my father talking to an uncle in the dining room. He thought I was upstairs. She is very smart, he said, but a person can succeed in school and still fail her family. That sentence became the family verdict. By the time I was 23, the difficult one had become the failure in family shorthand whenever my choices cost them something. Nobody announced the change. They just started talking as if my life away from the restaurant proved it. When I missed a cousin's wedding because of a surgery rotation, I had failed the family. When I could not cover a Friday shift at the restaurant because I had an exam Monday, I thought I was better than everyone. When I moved closer to the medical center during residency, I was becoming too American, which in our house meant too individual, too willing to choose your own schedule over everyone else's emergency. Neka stayed. Neka remembered birthdays. Neka knew which freezer at the restaurant made a rattling sound before it failed. Neka took Mom to appointments, picked Dad up after his colonoscopy, sat through supplier meetings, and eventually became general manager when my father admitted he no longer had the stamina to run both locations. She was the good daughter. I was the one with excuses. The part nobody in my family saw was that medicine did not feel like escape while I was living it. It felt like being flattened and rebuilt. 4 years of medical school became 6 years of integrated cardiothoracic training. Then additional fellowship work in complex aortic surgery. I learned to sleep in 90-minute pieces. I learned how quickly a stable patient could become unstable. I learned that talent mattered less than preparation and that arrogance was dangerous in anyone holding a scalpel. I was often the only Black woman in the room, and sometimes the only woman at all. Patients occasionally asked when the surgeon would arrive while I was standing beside their bed introducing myself. Older physicians called me young lady in conferences until I started answering their questions with data. I did not become calmer because my family taught me calm. I became calmer because operating rooms punish drama. When something goes wrong, nobody needs your outrage. They need your hands to stay steady. That was the woman I was becoming while my family kept arguing with the 22-year-old who had refused to defer medical school. And because I was angry, I helped them stay wrong. I stopped explaining. I stopped sending articles when I published research. I stopped mentioning when I finished fellowship. When I joined Meridian Heart Institute as an attending, my mother asked whether that meant I was finally done with school. I said, basically. When my father told a table full of relatives that I worked somewhere in cardiology, I did not correct him. At first, silence felt like dignity. Later, it became a wall I had helped build. The photograph in my desk drawer came from the one day I had still expected them to show up. I was 26, finishing medical school. Graduation was on a Saturday afternoon, and I mailed 4 tickets to my parents' house even though I could have handed them over at Sunday dinner. Mailing them made the invitation feel official. I wanted my mother to open the envelope and see my name printed in the program. I wanted my father to wear the gray suit he saved for church anniversaries. I wanted Neka there because whatever had grown between us, she was still the person who had quizzed me on biology flashcards when I was 16. 3 days before graduation, Mom called. Ada's table had landed a catering job for a convention downtown. 320 people. It was the biggest outside order the restaurant had ever handled, and one of their cooks had quit without notice. "We are in a terrible position," she said. I knew what was coming before she said it. I reminded her that graduation was at 2 and that she had known the date for months. "I know that too, Claire," she said. "Then tell me you're coming?" She was quiet for long enough that I could hear metal pans being stacked in the restaurant kitchen behind her. "Your father cannot manage this alone. Neka is there." Neka cannot be everywhere. I laughed once because the other option was crying. Apparently she has to be. "Don't do that." "Do what? Make everything a test of whether we love you." I still remember where I was standing, in the hallway outside a pharmacology classroom, because that sentence took something I had been afraid to say and turned it against me. I didn't make my graduation a test. "We celebrated when you got into medical school." "That was 4 years ago," I said. Mom said my name like a warning. "You know what? Fine. Do the catering?" She did, and none of them came. My roommate's father took the graduation photograph. I'm standing under a live oak in a black gown with green velvet trim, my diploma cover in one hand and my cap in the other. There are people behind me hugging parents and grandparents. I am smiling, and if you did not know me, you would think it was a happy picture. For years, I kept it face down in a moving box. When I finally had an office of my own at Meridian, I brought it with me and put it in the bottom drawer beneath extra pens, old conference badges, and a packet of instant oatmeal. My fellowship certificate went on the wall. My board certification went on the wall. The graduation photograph did not. I told myself I disliked clutter. The truth was simpler. Looking at it reminded me that I had earned something enormous and spent the afternoon pretending not to notice 3 empty seats. The family did not disappear from my life after that. Real estrangement is usually less clean. We still had Thanksgiving. We still had birthday dinners. I still went to the restaurant when I could and peeled labels off sauce bottles while Mom complained that my hands had become too soft for kitchen work. Dad would ask whether I was still doing the heart thing. Neka would send a group text if someone needed money for a funeral collection. Sometimes we laughed. That was what made the hurt difficult to explain. My parents were not monsters. They were capable of tenderness and cruelty in the same afternoon. My mother kept ginger tea ready when I came home exhausted. My father changed my brake pads without asking. Neka once drove 40 minutes at midnight to bring me a clean shirt after I spilled coffee down the front of mine before an interview. Then the conversation would turn to the restaurant, or my schedule, or some family event I could not attend, and the old roles would slide back into place. You know Claire, she is difficult. She has her own life now. The hospital people are her family. The second restaurant eventually closed. It lasted 4 years, longer than I expected and shorter than Dad admitted it would. They sold the equipment, negotiated the remaining lease, and kept the original Ada's table open. By then Aneka had become indispensable. She was 31 and had been planning to enroll in an evening MBA program. She postponed it when Pearland began failing. Then she never went. I knew that. I did not know what to do with it. Every time I looked at Aneka, I saw the accusation our parents had trained both of us to make. She had stayed. I had left. Every time she looked at me, I think she saw the door she had never walked through. The 3-year silence began at my father's 65th birthday dinner. I was 35 then, about a year into my attending job. Dad wanted the whole family at Ada's table on a Sunday. He told me 6 weeks in advance. I blocked the evening on my calendar. At 3:40 that afternoon, one of my patients started bleeding after a difficult operation. There are choices in life where both options are real and only one is possible. I called Aneka from the hospital. I may be late. She exhaled hard. Of course. Aneka, one of my patients is bleeding. I can't leave yet. Dad has been asking if you're coming since noon. I am coming. I just can't leave right now. You always have a reason. I looked through the glass toward the patient being rushed back to the operating room. Yes, I said. Today I have a reason. I arrived at the restaurant just after 9. The cake had been cut. 2 aunts were already leaving. My father was sitting at the head table with a paper birthday crown one of the grandchildren had made for him. I had changed out of scrubs, but there was still a red pressure mark across the bridge of my nose from my mask. Mom looked at the clock on the wall before she looked at me. Neka did not look up at all. I kissed Dad's cheek and handed him the gift I had left in my car that morning, a restored photograph of his parents outside their house in Enugu. He stared at it for a long time. Thank you, he said. For a moment, I thought maybe that would be enough. Then Mom said, you could have called earlier. I called Neka at 4. I didn't know at noon that a patient would bleed at 3:40. She lowered her voice. This is your father's 65th birthday. I know. Nothing is ever important enough for you to leave that hospital. There were relatives close enough to hear. I felt myself becoming 22 again. A woman almost died tonight. And your father keeps getting older? Both things were true. That should have stopped me. Instead, I said, what exactly would you like me to have done? Mom folded her arms. For once, chosen us. I had been awake since 5 that morning. I had spent hours trying to keep a woman from bleeding to death. I had driven across Houston after changing clothes in a locker room because I still wanted to hand my father his gift in person. Something in me went flat. I did choose you. I came when I could. Neka finally looked at me. You always come when you can. The rest of us come when we're needed. That one landed because it was not entirely unfair. I looked at her. You want me to apologize for not leaving an operating room? No. I want you to stop acting like your choices are automatically more important than ours because somebody gives you a badge. Dad said, enough. But Mom was crying now, quietly, which made everyone at the table look at me as if I had caused the weather. You have spent your whole life proving you don't need this family, she said. I heard myself answer, and you have spent my whole adult life punishing me for having one. Dad took off his glasses. Claire. I should have stopped. I did not. I said, if I am such a failure to this family, then stop grading me. Nobody spoke. I picked up my purse and left. 3 days later, Mom sent a message that said, when you're ready to speak respectfully, you know where we are. I stared at it for 20 minutes. Then I put my phone down. I did not answer. She did not call again, neither did Dad. NECA sent me exactly 2 messages in the next 3 years. One was a photo of our aunt's funeral program. The other said Dad's blood pressure medication had changed and she thought I should know. I replied thank you to both. That was our relationship. 3 women with the same last name, living within 40 miles of one another, communicating like people closing an insurance claim. I knew through cousins that Ada's table was still open. I knew my father had finally cut back to 3 days a week. I knew NECA had taken over most operations. I knew Mom had started singing in the church women's choir again. They knew less about me. I was promoted to Associate Program Director for our cardiothoracic residency and published research on complex aortic reconstruction. I bought a small townhouse 15 minutes from the medical center, made friends who knew how to feed me after overnight call, and built a life that was mostly peaceful. Peace did not stop me from missing my mother. More than once, the smell of stew or an old family photograph made me reach for my phone. Pride always gave me a reason to put it down. Then on a Thursday in late March, my phone rang at 8:17 in the evening. I was sitting at my kitchen island eating cereal for dinner while reviewing a residence evaluation. The number was not saved anymore. I knew it anyway. My mother's number had been the same since I was in college. I watched it ring 4 times before I answered. Hello for a second, neither of us spoke. Then I heard my mother's voice. Claire? 3 years disappeared and did not disappear. Hi, Mom. She cleared her throat. I need to ask you something medical, of course she did. The thought came so fast and so bitterly that I hated myself for having it. I set down my spoon. Okay. She said her primary doctor had heard a murmur months earlier. An echocardiogram led to more testing. Her aortic valve was severely narrowed, and a CT scan had shown an aneurysm in the ascending aorta. She had been seeing a cardiologist. Dr. Raj Patel in Sugarland. He says I need surgery, she said. How large is the aneurysm? I don't know, 5 something. Do you have the report? NECA has all that. Are you having chest pain? She described pressure rather than sharp pain, shortness of breath when she climbed stairs, and no fainting. The answers became quieter as my questions became more specific. Her answers got quieter as my questions became more specific. Then she said, he wants me seen at Meridian. I sat up. Meridian was my hospital. By whom? He said there is an aortic team there. He knows someone. My pulse changed, not from fear exactly, but from the instant professional narrowing that happens when a case becomes real. Did he give you a name? No. NECA wrote it down. I don't have the paper. I waited. Mom said you know people there. It was the closest she could come to asking for my help. I could have made her say it. I did not. Yes, I said. I know people there. She let out a breath. Can you tell me who is good? I looked across my kitchen at the dark window over the sink. Have Dr. Patel send your echo CT and his notes to the aortic surgery office. The team can review them. Would you know if they're any good? A laugh almost escaped me, because my mother genuinely did not know what I did. She knew I was a doctor and that I worked with hearts. Somewhere during 15 years of not asking and my 15 years of not explaining, she had never learned that I was a surgeon. They're very good. All right. Another silence, then she said, Thank you, Claire. I could hear a TV in the background. I could imagine Dad in the living room, and Neka at the dining table with a folder of reports, all of them close enough to listen without speaking. Mom, yes? If you get new chest pain, faint, or your breathing gets suddenly worse, you don't wait for an appointment. You go to the emergency room. I understand. Promise me? Her voice changed just slightly. I promise. We hung up after 4 minutes and 32 seconds. I sat in my kitchen with the cereal going soft in the bowl. Then I went upstairs, opened my work laptop, and logged into the secure referral dashboard. There was nothing there yet. I told myself I was checking because she was my mother. That was only half true. The other half was that once she had described the problem, she had become a patient in my mind, and patients with severe aortic stenosis and an enlarging ascending aorta do not care how complicated your family history is. The referral arrived at 10:06 the next morning. I did not go looking for private information because I was her daughter. Dr. Patel's office had sent the records to our aortic surgery program, where I was one of the attending surgeons responsible for reviewing complex referrals that week. Her name appeared in the same queue as everyone else's. Seeing it there still felt wrong. Adaze Okafor, 64. Severe bicuspid aortic stenosis. Ascending aortic aneurysm measuring 5.7 centimeters. Increasing shortness of breath over 3 months. I stopped reading. Then I called my division chief. Dr. Aaron Chen had been a surgeon longer than I had been a doctor. He was 56, careful, dry, and almost impossible to impress. He had also trained me during the final year of my fellowship and knew enough about my family to understand why I was calling before I finished the first sentence. My mother's referral is in our queue. He was quiet for a moment. Have you opened it? Only enough to confirm it's her. Good. Don't do anything else yet. That was why I called him. Doctors are not immune to bad judgment because we know the rules. Sometimes knowing the rules is exactly why you need another person in the room. Physicians generally avoid treating immediate family when there is a reasonable alternative, especially with high-risk invasive care. Emotion can distort judgment in either direction, and open-heart surgery is not the place to discover how. Aaron pulled the case out of my review queue and assigned it to himself. I'll look at the imaging, he said. You stay out of the chart unless we decide there's a clinical reason for you to be involved. Thank you. Does she know what you do? I stared at my desk. Apparently not. He did not laugh. That sounds complicated. It is. I meant the family part. The aorta I can handle. That afternoon, he came to my office with a printed image from the CT. There is a reason Patel sent this to you. I looked at him, not the image. You reviewed it? Twice? He pointed to the anatomy. My mother's aneurysm extended farther than the outside report had made clear. The valve disease was severe. There were also features that would make the operation technically more demanding than a straightforward valve replacement. Aaron could do the surgery, so could 2 other surgeons in Houston. But the specific reconstruction her anatomy might require was something I did often. I hated the fact that this mattered. What do you think? He asked. I think you're asking me a question you already know the answer to. I know the technical answer. And the other answer is that she's my mother. Yes, I sat back. He said, we have options. I can operate without you. We can refer her to another center. Or if she wants care here and if you're willing, you can join as co-surgeon with me. But that would need full disclosure, her explicit agreement, and review from the department. I would handle the perioperative decision-making that doesn't require your specific role, and I would be the primary person communicating with the family. I looked at the image then. For most people, a CT scan of the chest is shades of gray. For me, it was a map. I could see the problem that had been making my mother stop halfway up the stairs. I could see why Dr. Patel was worried. I could also see the version of the operation Aaron was considering and where my experience might matter. I wanted to say no, not because I did not love her. Because I did. Let me think. Take the afternoon. I did not need the afternoon. I needed about 6 minutes and a closed office door. I thought about my mother's graduation absence. I thought about my father's birthday dinner. I thought about every time someone in my family had reduced my career to evidence that I believed I was better than them. Then I did the only thing that made sense. I took all of it out of the decision. If Adiz Okafor had been any other 64-year-old woman with the same anatomy, would I want a surgeon with my experience in the room? Yes. If another qualified surgeon could safely do the case without me, was I indispensable? No, that difference mattered. I called Erin. I'll participate if the review agrees and if she specifically consents after she knows who I am. If she is uncomfortable, you do it without me or we transfer her. Good. And I don't want the family told through me. Also good. Erin reviewed the plan with our service chief and a clinical ethics consultant. They accepted my participation only with defined roles, independent decision-making by Erin, and my mother's explicit choice. If they had said no, I would have accepted no. My mother came to Meridian the following Monday for testing and consultation. I stayed in another building. Erin met with her and Enika. He explained the operation, the risks, the expected recovery, and the possibility that the final reconstruction would depend on what they found. He told her a second attending surgeon from the aortic team might join him because of the complexity. He did not tell her the second surgeon's name, not because we were staging a surprise, because at that point the staffing decision was not final, and because I had asked to be present myself for the disclosure if I was going to participate. I needed to see her reaction and make sure she did not feel trapped by family pressure 5 minutes before a major operation. Mom signed the standard procedural consent with Erin after their discussion. My participation would still require a separate confirmation before surgery. Neka texted me that night. Mom met Dr. Chen, surgery Thursday. I looked at the message for a long time before replying. I know. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. How do you know? Because Patel sent the referral to my service. The dots came back immediately. Your service? I set the phone down 30 seconds later. It rang. Neka, I answered. What does that mean? It means I work in the aortic surgery program at Meridian. I know you work at Meridian. No, you know I work at Meridian. Claire, don't do this. Do what? Talk like I'm stupid. I closed my eyes. There it was. We could turn any sentence into the old fight if we tried hard enough. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm saying you don't know my job. I know you're a heart doctor. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. Silence. I could hear restaurant noise behind her, plates and voices, even though it was after 9. You operate on hearts? Yes, Enea. That's what I do. Since when? I almost said something cruel. Since you were busy being the good daughter. Since Mom skipped graduation. Since Dad stopped asking. Instead, I said, I've been an attending surgeon for 4 years. She did not speak. Then, very quietly, does Mom know? No. Are you going to tell her? Before surgery, if I'm part of the team. Another silence. Part of the team how? I told her enough. Not details from Mom's chart that she did not already have a right to know, but the basic truth. Erin had reviewed the case, my experience might be useful, and we were deciding whether I would join him. Neka's voice hardened. You cannot do this to her. The sentence surprised me. Do what to her? Walk in there after 3 years and make her surgery about you. I stood up from my desk. I'm not making anything about me. Then don't operate on her. I kept my voice even. That isn't your decision, Aneka. She'll be terrified when she sees you. She already is terrified. You know that. Aneka exhaled. You know what I mean? I did. Aneka believed my presence would force Mom to confront 15 years of contempt while wearing a hospital gown. I believed that too. That was precisely why I would not let the confrontation become the point. I will tell her before anything happens, I said. She can say no. Dr. Chen can do the surgery without me. If she wants another hospital, we'll help arrange that if it's medically safe. She is not going to be punished for being my mother. Neka's voice dropped. You really think this is punishment? No, I think you do. She hung up. I did not call back. Tuesday morning, Mom was admitted after waking with worsening chest pressure. Her blood tests did not show a heart attack, but the change in symptoms moved the timetable. Aaron called me at 7:30. "We should do this Thursday as planned. Maybe sooner if anything changes." "I want you in," I said yes. Wednesday evening, I went home before dark for once. I did not sleep much. At 2 in the morning I got up, made tea, and stood in my kitchen looking at the phone. I could call Mom. I could explain everything before the hospital morning. That might have been kinder. It also might have turned a clinical choice into a family negotiation while she was frightened and exhausted, with Nneka and Dad on either side of her. Aaron and I had agreed that if I participated, the cleanest conversation would happen in pre-op with him present, before sedating medication, when she could ask questions and choose without the restaurant the past, or any relative controlling the room. I put the phone down. At 4:30 I showered. At 5:15 I drove into the medical center. At 5:40 I reviewed the operative plan with Aaron. At 6:12 I walked through the curtain and saw my mother for the first time in 3 years. She looked smaller than I remembered. That was the first thing. Not older, smaller. The woman who had filled my childhood with instructions was under 2 white blankets with a plastic bracelet around her wrist. When I told her I was one of the surgeons, disbelief crossed her face before fear did. "What do you mean? Cardiothoracic surgeon?" I kept my voice neutral. I trained in heart and chest surgery after medical school. My specialty includes complex aortic operations. My father was still sitting behind me. Nneka had gone pale. Mom looked at Aaron, who had entered a few seconds after I did. "Is this true?" Aaron nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Okafor. Dr. Okafor is one of our attending surgeons. Dr. Patel sent your imaging to our aortic program because of the complexity of your case. Claire has particular experience with the part of the operation we discussed yesterday." Mom turned back to me. "You knew all this since the referral came in?" "Yes, and you didn't tell me yourself." "I told the service chief immediately that you're my mother. Dr. Chen reviewed your case independently. We are telling you now because if I join the operation, you need to know and agree before we proceed." Her eyes filled. "Join? Yes. You're going to cut me open." It was such a mother sentence that despite everything, my throat tightened. "If you want me to be part of the team." "What if I don't?" "Then I step out. Dr. Chen can proceed without me. Or we can discuss another surgeon. No one will hold it against you," Nneka said. "Mom, you don't have to decide right this second." Aaron glanced at the clock but did not rush her. Mom looked at me. "Are you good?" There are questions that hurt because they are insults. That one hurt because it was sincere. My mother truly did not know. I could have listed outcomes, publications, case volume, and training. Instead I said, "I'm qualified to do this operation. Dr. Chen would not have me here if I weren't." Aaron added, "I asked her to join me." Mom's mouth trembled. "Would you do it if I were not your mother?" I understood the question immediately. "Yes." "Would you want you in the room?" "Yes." She looked down at her hands. Then she said, "Okay." Not dramatically. Not with forgiveness. Just okay. I moved closer and went through my part of the plan in plain language. I told her what I would be responsible for, what Aaron would be responsible for, and what the major risks were. She asked 3 questions. One was about stroke. One was about whether she would wake up with a breathing tube. One was whether she could die. "Yes," I said. My father made a sound behind me. Mom kept looking at my face. "How likely?" I gave her the best estimate our team had based on her health and procedure. She listened. Then she signed the additional confirmation. When I finished, I capped my pen. For a second, I was her daughter again and had no idea what to do with my hands. Mom solved it. She reached out. I took her fingers. They were cold. "I didn't know," she whispered. I did not ask what she meant. There was no time to unpack 15 years beside a pre-op stretcher. "I know," I said. Then I let go because the operating room was ready. People imagine surgery as a series of dramatic moments. Most good surgery is the opposite. It is preparation so thorough that the dramatic moments never happen. In the operating room, my mother stopped being the woman who had missed my graduation and became the patient whose name, procedure, allergies, imaging, blood availability, and plan we confirmed out loud before anything began. The team completed the timeout. Anesthesia induced her. The room settled into the rhythm I knew better than almost anywhere else in my life. Erin stood across from me. We did not discuss my family. We discussed anatomy. The operation lasted a little over 5 hours. Her diseased aortic valve was replaced. The enlarged segment of her ascending aorta was removed and reconstructed with a graft. The anatomy was difficult in exactly the way the imaging had suggested, which was why Erin had wanted a second attending with my experience. There were no miraculous last-second saves. No machine failed. Nobody burst through the doors with a secret piece of information. There was only work, careful exposure, repeated checks, clear communication, decisions made in sequence. At one point, Erin asked what I thought about the safest way to handle a portion of the reconstruction. I answered. He considered it, agreed, and we proceeded. That exchange lasted maybe 20 seconds. It was also the purest answer I ever gave my family. Not a speech. Not a resume competence. Offered when it was needed. When we came off bypass, I watched my mother's heart take over its work again. I have seen that hundreds of times. It had never looked like that. I did not allow myself to turn it into a metaphor while I was standing at the table. Her blood pressure was stable. The new valve function looked good on the intraoperative imaging. We checked for bleeding, closed, and transferred her to the cardiovascular ICU. Then I scrubbed my hands and stood alone at the sink longer than necessary. Erin came up beside me. You did fine. She did fine. He glanced at me. That too. Because he was the designated family communicator, he went to the consultation room where Dad and Enika were waiting. I stayed out. That choice confused my father more than anything else. He found me 20 minutes later near the staff elevators. He had been crying. Emeka Okafor hated crying in public. Even at funerals, he found jobs to do so he could keep moving. He stopped in front of me. Your mother is okay? For now, yes. The operation went as planned. The ICU team will watch her closely. He nodded several times. Then he looked at my scrub cap. You really do this. I could have been angry. Instead, I was tired. Yes, Dad? Every day? Most days. He put one hand against the wall. I thought you were. I don't know what I thought. That sentence did more to me than an apology would have, because it was true. He did not know what he thought. For 15 years, my family had not needed an accurate version of me. They only needed a version that made the restaurant story make sense. Claire left. Nneka stayed. Nneka was loyal. Claire was difficult. Once those roles were assigned, details became inconvenient. Dad looked at me. Did we make you hide this from us? I thought about the graduation photograph. No, I said. You made it easy. I did the hiding. He lowered his eyes. I went to change clothes. My mother remained intubated for several hours, which was expected. I did not hover at her bedside. I checked the clinical information I was responsible for, then stepped back and let the ICU team do their jobs. At 7 that evening, I went home. That surprised Nneka. She caught me near the parking garage. You're leaving? Yes. What if something happens? The ICU has an attending physician, 2 advanced practice providers, nurses who do this every day, and Dr. Chen is on call for the surgical service. But you're her surgeon. I'm also her daughter. Nneka folded her arms. That never stopped you before. I looked at her. There it was again, the old reflex. If I did too much, I was choosing medicine over family. If I stepped back, I was abandoning family. I was too tired to participate. Mom is where she needs to be. I'll be back in the morning. She stared at the concrete floor. Then she said, I looked you up. I waited, after we talked. Okay, I found the hospital page. Your papers. That video where you're speaking at some conference. I said nothing. Nneka's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Why didn't you tell us? The question irritated me more than I expected. I did tell you for years. Medical school surgery residency. Fellowship. You just stopped asking what the words meant. She flinched. I regretted the sharpness, but not the truth. Then she said, "Do you know what they called me every time you weren't there? The good daughter." Yes, she laughed without humor. The good daughter, the reliable one, the one who understands sacrifice. I leaned against the car beside me. Neka rubbed her forehead. You think that felt good? Sometimes. It did at first? That surprised me, she nodded. Of course it did. You were always the smart one. Dad bragged about your grades to every customer who would listen. Teachers loved you. You got scholarships. You got out. I didn't get out. I went to school. Same difference from where I was standing. The parking garage hummed around us. Neka continued. When Pearland started failing, I wanted to leave. I had been accepted to an evening MBA program. Did you know that? I knew you were thinking about one. I paid the deposit. I had not known that. Mom cried when I told her. Dad said he couldn't keep both restaurants running without me. You had already left, so what was I supposed to do? Be the second selfish daughter. I stared at her. Neka gave a small shrug. So I stayed. And every time they called me good, it became harder to go. You hated being the failure. I hated being the proof they were right. That changed something. Not everything. She had still said cruel things. I had still carried the family's judgment alone for years, but for the first time I understood that the role opposite mine had bars too. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at me with an expression almost identical to the one I must have given her earlier. Why didn't you tell us you cut people's hearts open for a living? I nearly smiled. Nearly. We got very good at not telling each other things. Yeah. We stood there another minute. Then Neka said, Mom kept your graduation program. I stopped breathing for a second. What? The medical school one? It's in her prayer book. How do you know? I packed her hospital bag. It fell out. I looked away. She didn't come. I know she didn't, Naka said. Keeping a piece of paper doesn't change that. No, it doesn't. Naka did not defend her. That mattered, she just said. I thought you should know. I drove home. At my townhouse, I sat in the dark living room without turning on the television. For years, I had treated my family's rejection like a clean diagnosis. They did not value me. Simple. Then my mother kept the graduation program for 12 years. My sister gave up an MBA because being the good daughter had become another kind of cage. My father had stood in a hospital hallway and admitted he had no idea what I actually did. None of those facts erased the hurt. They did make it more complicated. Medicine had taught me to respect complicated things. My mother was extubated early the next morning. Aaron texted me before I left home. Awake? Neuro intact. Grumpy. I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. When I arrived, I checked in with the surgical team first. Her numbers were reassuring, painful, tired, nauseated, but moving in the right direction. I waited until I was no longer needed professionally. Then I went to her room as her daughter. Mom looked terrible. That is another truth people leave out of recovery stories. Successful heart surgery does not make you look victorious the next day. It makes you look like someone whose body has survived a controlled catastrophe. Her hair was flattened on one side. Her voice was rough from the breathing tube. Tubes and monitors surrounded her. She had a pillow against her chest for coughing. She opened her eyes. Doctor? The word came out like sandpaper. I pulled a chair closer. Don't start. Her mouth moved. I realized she was trying to smile. I helped adjust the blanket, then sat down. For a while, neither of us talked. Finally, she said, Neka showed me your hospital page. Of course she had. I looked toward the monitor. Mom whispered the words as if she were reading a language she had somehow missed. Associate Program Director, Complex Aortic Surgery. 4 years. 4 years as an attending, I said. She closed her eyes, a tear slid toward her ear. I called you a failure. I did not rescue her from the sentence. She needed to finish it. I told people you thought you were better than us. I waited. She opened her eyes again. Why did you do it? I knew what she meant. The operation, because it was the right operation for you, and because Dr. Chen believed my experience would help. After everything. After everything, you weren't angry? I was angry. That seemed to confuse her. You were angry and you still. Mom, anger doesn't change your aorta. She gave one rough breath that might have been a laugh and immediately winced. I held the pillow tighter against her chest while she coughed. When the pain passed, she looked exhausted. I don't understand you, she whispered. That's been the problem. Her eyes closed again. I thought the conversation was over. Then she said, I was afraid you would leave and discover we were small. I did not move, she continued in pieces, pausing for breath. The restaurant was everything. Your father and I built it from nothing. NECA stayed. You kept going farther. Every year there was another school, another hospital, another title I didn't understand. So you called me selfish. I made your leaving mean you were rejecting us. I looked at my mother's face. Did it ever occur to you that I was waiting for you to be proud of me? Her eyes opened. I was proud. Then why didn't you say it? She swallowed. Pride is not always a good thing where I came from. Neither is silence. That landed? She nodded once. Then I asked the question I had been carrying since I was 26. Why didn't you come to graduation? She stared at the ceiling. The catering job. I know about the catering job, Mom. She stared at the ceiling. I told myself the restaurant needed me. It did not need all three of you. No, she said. It didn't. The answer came quickly. I had expected an excuse. Instead, she said, I was angry with you. There it was. Mom's voice shook. You had chosen medicine, Pearland was failing. NECA was exhausted, your father was ashamed, and then your invitation came with your name printed in that program, and I knew if I sat there and watched you become a doctor, I would have to admit you had been right to go. I felt something inside me go very still. She turned her face toward me. So I stayed at the restaurant. Tears ran into her hair. I have regretted it ever since. I did not say it was okay. It was not. I did not say I forgave her. I was not ready. I took a tissue from the box and handed it to her. She was too weak to lift her arm comfortably, so after a moment I wiped the side of her face myself. That was as much forgiveness as I could give that day. Her recovery took time. She moved from the ICU to the step-down unit. The chest tubes came out, and each day she walked a little farther. Aaron and the team managed her care. I answered ordinary questions as her daughter, but redirected treatment decisions to the physicians responsible for them. Because being useful in our family had always had a way of becoming obligated. On the fourth post-operative day, Dad asked if I could just take over her medications once she got home. No, he blinked. I smiled a little. I'll help all of you understand the discharge instructions. Her cardiologist and primary doctor will manage her medications. The old Claire would have heard that request as proof they only valued her now because they needed something. The older Claire heard a frightened husband trying to find the safest person in the room. I could say no without turning him into an enemy, he nodded. Okay. Then he surprised me. I'm sorry about your graduation. I looked at him. Mom had clearly told him about our conversation. He rubbed his hands together. I knew she was angry. I was angry too. I should have come. Yes. He accepted the word, no defense, no story about the restaurant, just yes. Mom went home 6 days after surgery, for the first 2 weeks, and NECA stayed at my parents' house. I visited twice, not daily. Ada's table stayed closed for 10 days, something that had never happened in my childhood. Who decided that? I asked NECA. She leaned against the counter. I did. I glanced toward the living room. Dad agreed to that. Eventually, it took some work. How bad was the argument? Only medium. We both laughed. Then NECA said, I'm reducing the hours when we reopen. I looked at her. Good, and I'm applying to the MBA program again. Part-time? She said it casually, but I understood what it cost her. Good, I said again. She raised one eyebrow. That's all you're gonna say, I smiled. What do you want, balloons? Maybe I do. I'll buy balloons when you get in, she smiled. We were not sisters again because of one parking garage conversation. We were sisters trying. There is a difference. Mom's 6-week follow-up went well. By then, she could walk around the block without stopping. Her incision was healing. Her voice had regained its usual authority, which meant she was back to correcting Dad's grocery choices and complaining that everyone put too much salt in food. After the appointment, she asked if I had 10 minutes. We sat in a quiet family consultation room near the clinic. She had brought her prayer book. I recognized the blue cover. She had owned it since I was a teenager. Mom opened it and removed a folded sheet of paper. My medical school graduation program. The crease down the middle was nearly white from being opened and closed. My name was circled in blue ink. I touched the paper but did not take it. You kept this? Yes. Why? She looked down. Because not going did not make me stop knowing where you were. That sentence hurt in a new way. I said, you could have called. So could you? Yes. We sat with that. No villain, no innocent party either. Just two stubborn women who had spent years turning pain into principle. Mom slid the program toward me. I want you to have it. I pushed it back. No. Her face fell. I said, keep it. You were the one who missed it. For a second, I thought that sounded cruel. Then she smiled sadly. Fair. She folded it and put it back in the prayer book. Before we left, she said, Claire, I am proud of you. I had imagined those words for years. In my imagination, they fixed something. In real life, they were quieter. They did not give me back graduation day. They did not erase my father's birthday dinner or 15 years of being reduced to a family cautionary tale. They did not return Aneka's lost years either. They were simply late. Late things can still matter. They just cannot pretend to be on time. 3 months after Mom's surgery, Aneka was accepted into the evening MBA program. I bought the balloons, not many. 6. Dad complained they blocked the restaurant office door. Mom told him to move the doorstop. Ada's table reduced its hours to 5 days a week. For the first time since I was a child, my parents had Sundays with no restaurant at all. We did not immediately start having Sunday dinners. That would have been too neat. The first family meal I attended was in July, at my parents' house, not the restaurant. Dad grilled fish badly. Neka brought Jalo from Ada's table because none of us trusted him with the entire meal. Mom sat on the patio and got annoyed whenever someone told her not to lift something. Nobody called me difficult. Nobody called Enke the good daughter. At one point, Dad started to say, Claire is always so stubborn about. Then he stopped himself. I looked at him. He sighed. Claire has strong opinions. Neka laughed so hard she almost dropped her glass. It was not transformation. It was practice. I kept boundaries and did not become the family's on-call physician or try to repay every dinner I had missed. When I was on call, I was on call. When I could come, I came. Mom could be disappointed without turning disappointment into a verdict on my character. Neka and I got coffee once a month. Sometimes we talked about Mom and Dad. Sometimes we did not. She told me she had spent years resenting me for leaving and more years resenting herself for staying. I told her I had made her into a symbol too. In my version of the family, she had been the daughter who willingly helped them judge me. That was not the whole truth. She had been trying to survive the role she was given just as I had. 6 months after the operation, I was sitting in my office late one afternoon when I opened the bottom drawer looking for a charger. The graduation photograph was still there. Black gown, green velvet, diploma cover. A 26-year-old woman smiling under a live oak while pretending nobody was missing. I took it out. For years I had hidden that picture because I thought it showed abandonment. Now I saw something else. I had graduated anyway. Not to spite them. Not because I did not need them. I had wanted them there desperately. They failed me that day, and I still became who I was trying to become. There was no revenge in that. Only time. I found a plain black frame in the supply cabinet down the hall. I put the photograph inside and set it on the bookshelf behind my desk, below my board certification and beside a small ceramic heart one of my residents had given me. The next morning, Aaron noticed it. New? Old. He nodded and went back to talking about the day's cases. That was exactly right. The photograph did not need a speech. Neither did I. My mother needed a surgeon, and I walked in. She learned what I had become. I learned that being seen late is not the same as being seen when you needed it. But it is not nothing. And when my family finally began to understand me, I did not hand them my life and ask them to grade it again. I let them know me slowly, on terms that left room for all of us to change.